I used to believe that nothing ever changed in Willow Creek. The same pale morning skies, the same rutted streets, the same faces murmuring the same phrases repeated over the years. My world was a small, safe circle where even the winds seemed to ask permission to pass. As the daughter of Pastor Hartwell, I was taught to smile without showing too much of my teeth and to dream without ever crossing the line of what was permitted. It was easy to live like that, easy until the day I saw him for the first time. He came on foot, a solitary figure under the faded afternoon sun, with a sagging backpack over one shoulder and boots so worn they seemed to carry centuries of roads beneath them. He didn't look around. He didn't seek welcome. He walked as if he knew he belonged only to himself. And while the town paused to watch him with narrowed eyes and words whispered behind curtains, something inside me, something I didn't even know existed, trembled. It wasn't fear nor childish curiosity. It was as if, for the first time, I caught the scent of freedom in the air, and it had the dry, wild taste of a dusty road and worn boots. I tried to ignore it. I tried to be the Adeline Hartwell everyone expected, composed, obedient, untouchable. I passed by him without averting my gaze, as good manners dictated, which were, in truth, a disguised art of invisibility. But it took only a fraction of a second, a deeper breath, for the invisible weight I'd carried for years to begin cracking within me. That night, as my father read verses in the living room and my mother embroidered under the dim light of the lamp, all I could think about was that wanderer with steady steps and the eyes of someone who had lost and found the world so many times. And for the first time, what had once felt like comfort, my home, my church, my town, tightened around me like clothes that had suddenly become too small. In the days that followed, it seemed every step I took was shadowed by his silent presence. He didn't blend in. He bought coffee at Mrs. Louise's store, speaking no more than 2 words. He slept in the old abandoned shack near the train tracks, where no one dared go since last winter collapsed part of the roof. He worked here and there, taking on small jobs no one else wanted, chopping wood, fixing fences, cleaning the churches, storage. It was as if he knew how close he could come before being seen as a threat, and he respected that invisible line with a disconcerting dignity. Women crossed the street to avoid him. Men narrowed their eyes, suspicious. Even my father, who always preached about welcoming and loving one's neighbor, pursed his lips in a way I'd never seen before whenever the stranger passed by. And I, caught in the middle of it all, felt a restlessness growing in my chest, as if my very soul was being called out from the lukewarm safety it had always slumbered in. One Sunday afternoon, as the last congregants lingered under the church portico, I saw him again, leaning against the wooden fence, arms crossed, his gaze lost in the golden horizon of wheat and dust. It was a scene of such profound solitude it cut through the air. Before I could convince myself to turn back, my feet were already carrying me toward him, as if moving of their own accord. When our eyes finally met, there was no greeting, no polite smiles, no cold etiquette I'd been taught to wear like armor. There was only a silent question between us, something I wouldn't know how to put into words, but that burned in my bones. I stood there, a few steps away, feeling my own heart wrestle against the invisible shackles of caution. And in that charged silence, I realized, sometimes just being in the presence of someone who carries an entire road on their back is enough to make you question whether the path you've always followed was truly the right one. That night, the restlessness became unbearable. The sky seemed heavier, the stars more distant, and even the creak of the old wood beneath my feet sounded like a call I could no longer ignore. Lying in bed, staring at the darkened ceiling, I imagined the road. He must have traveled, scorching deserts, silent forests, merciless storms. I had never gone beyond the limits of our town, yet in that moment, It felt as if there was a road inside me, winding through all the shoulds I'd always accepted without question. I rose slowly, barefoot on the cold floor, and approached the window. Outside, the world seemed asleep, trusting in the illusion that tomorrow would be the same as yesterday. But I knew that for me, something had already changed, and there was no going back. The next day, the town buzzed with whispers. They said the wanderer, that stranger with worn boots, had helped save the blacksmith's son, who had nearly been crushed by a log. For a moment, they said, he was seen as a hero. But whispers are fragile in small towns, and soon they painted a shadow over him again. Why is he here? What does he really want? The questions hung in the air like dust that never settles. I heard it all, but my eyes no longer saw what others saw. When I met him again near the old oak, I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just walked toward him. He kept a silent respect for the fragility of my world, as if he feared breaking something he didn't yet understand. His name, Elijah, was spoken unhurriedly, as if he knew that names sometimes say less than silence. And as I searched for some ready story to fill the space between us, I realized Elijah wasn't made of easy stories. He was made of absences, of losses carved into the soul, of long winters most people would never face. And that was what drew me to him so painfully. He was real in a world that had taught me to live by appearances. Our encounters became a kind of silent ritual. Sometimes we exchanged words, other times we just shared the silence, but in both there was an understanding that disarmed me. He spoke little of the past, but his eyes said everything, about endless roads, abandoned homes, the courage it takes to keep walking even when everything inside begs for rest. Amid these broken conversations and weighted glances, I realized that what was growing between us wasn't just curiosity, nor simple friendship. It was something more primal, more essential, like the recognition of two souls that know they're wanderers in a world that prefers certainties. And with every word exchanged, every shared silence, the walls the town had built inside me began to crumble, one by one, without fanfare, but with an unstoppable force. As the weeks slipped through our furtive meetings, I realized I had become two people, the one who fulfilled her duties under the town's watchful eyes, and the one who, in the silent margins of the day, learned to be free beside Elijah. There was something in his presence that stripped away my masks before I even noticed. With him, I didn't need to measure my words, or hide my doubts, my fears, my unfinished dreams. We sat in the shade of forgotten trees, or walked along roads where only crickets witnessed what was blossoming between us. And in those moments, I felt, no, I knew, that something in me was changing irreversibly, like a river that finally finds a crack in the rock and begins slowly to carve its new path. But the town wasn't blind. Gazes began to weigh on me like stones in my pockets. The women who once greeted me with wide smiles now averted their eyes, muttering prayers under their breath. My father, always so certain of his place in the world, started watching me with an uncomfortable intensity, like someone observing a vase about to shatter. And amid it all, a bitter guilt grew within me, the guilt of wanting something I knew. The world around me wouldn't forgive me for desiring. Elijah noticed. His eyes, always attentive, carried a restrained sadness whenever our paths crossed, as if he knew he was a promise the world would never let me keep without a cost. And yet, even under the weight of judgments and fears, even knowing the price hovering in the air like an invisible blade, I kept returning to him. Not out of rebellion, but because, for the first time in my life, I felt I was approaching the person I was meant to be from the start. I knew I couldn't live in that limbo forever. There were days when the weight of the gazes seemed to choke the very air I breathed. The town, once my home, had become a silent courtroom ready to judge every step, every gesture, every breath out of line. The final straw came on a stifling morning when, unintentionally, I let a smile slip as I spotted Elijah crossing the square. It was a fleeting moment, an almost invisible movement, but enough to ignite the spark everyone had been waiting for. That night, at the dinner table, my father called me by my full name, a thing he only did when the gravity of the situation demanded it, and asked, with that icy calm sharper than any shout, if I thought my friendship with the stranger was appropriate for a pastor's daughter. I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet. Every fiber of my being screamed to deny, to retreat, to save what little of my image remained. But something inside me, something older and truer than any lesson I'd been taught, wouldn't allow it. I only lowered my eyes, and the silence that filled the room said everything. I was forbidden to see him, forbidden to leave without an escort, forbidden, ultimately, to choose what my heart had already chosen. I spent days confined in the house where I grew up, watching life slip through the window like sand through my fingers. But Elijah didn't come looking for me, and that, more than anything, broke something in me. I understood, with a piercing clarity, that he would never ask me to betray what I wasn't ready to abandon. It was I who had to decide. It was I who had to cross the line, separating comfort from truth. On a night when the wind battered the windows as if trying to tear the house's walls down, I put on my simplest dress, slipped on my worn boots, and left without looking back. Each step was a defiance of what was expected of me. Each breath was an unspoken prayer for courage not to falter. I didn't know where Elijah would be. I didn't even know if he'd still be there. But in that moment, more than the need to find him, there was something greater, the need to find myself. The town faded behind me like a bleached dream as I walked the dusty road, feeling the night open around me like a heavy, liberating cloak. Each step was an unspoken farewell. Each gust of wind seemed to carry away the expectations, the fears, the shackles I'd borne for so long without even noticing their weight. I didn't know what awaited me beyond that dimly lit road, but for the first time in my life, uncertainty didn't paralyze me. It propelled me. My eyes filled with tears, but not of sadness. They were tears of something deeper, something that seemed to cleanse my soul from within, washing away the marks left by years of silent obedience. When I spotted the small clearing where Elijah often rested, my heart raced with a mix of hope and dread. And there he was, sitting by a faint fire, as if he'd been waiting for me all along, as if he knew that sooner or later I'd have to walk this path alone. He stood slowly, without surprise, without demands, and we looked at each other. Not as two people defying the world on a whim, but as two castaways who, against all logic, found shelter in one another. There were no promises, no guarantees. There was only presence, raw and whole, and that was more sacred than any blessing uttered on the polished pews of the church. I said nothing. My words had been caught somewhere between the past and the present. Elijah simply extended his hand, and in that simple gesture was everything: welcome, risk, invitation. Without hesitation, without asking permission from fear, I took it. And in that touch, dry, warm, firm, I understood that freedom wasn't the absence of pain, nor escape from judgments. Freedom was choosing, even knowing all that could be lost. The days that followed weren't easy. The road offered no promises, only dust, sun, and uncertainties. We slept under the open sky or in forgotten inns where the sheets smelled of wind and old memories. We had little beyond what we carried on our backs, and yet I had never felt so rich. With Elijah, I learned that freedom came at a high cost. Sometimes it was hunger, exhaustion, raw loneliness. But alongside that, there was something more precious. There was the living, pulsing sensation of owning every step, every choice. There were mornings when my body ached and hope seemed distant, but it was enough to see the way Elijah looked at me, as if he knew I was exactly where I was meant to be, for me to find the strength to keep going. The life I'd abandoned no longer ruled me. And though, on some nights, fear still whispered in my ear, what if this is all a mistake? There was something stronger in my chest, something that answered firmly. Then it will be my mistake, my story, my truth. We worked where we could, he as a carpenter, I helping with small tasks, washing, sewing, serving meals in roadside taverns. Sometimes I saw in his eyes a bitter doubt, the fear that sooner or later I'd regret it. But what Elijah didn't yet understand was that I wasn't following him. I was following myself, and he was merely walking beside me, not ahead of me. Every scar we carried, every loss we didn't name, was an invisible part of the bond that tied us. There was no grandeur in what we built, no castles, no feasts, no applause. There were small moments of victory, like sharing a piece of bread at the end of a hard day, or finding shelter under a tree when a storm seemed ready to swallow us. And it was in those moments, in the simplest and quietest things, that I understood. We had found something few have the courage to seek, a home within each other, made not of bricks, but of choice, renewed each dawn. Years have passed since the night I left Willow Creek behind. Sometimes the memory of that girl, of the Adeline who walked with measured steps through familiar streets, still visits me like a distant dream, like a song whose lyrics I've nearly forgotten. And whenever that happens, I smile with a quiet tenderness, because I know she isn't lost. She just had to die so I could be born. Today I sit on the porch of the small house Elijah and I built with our own hands, in a clearing forgotten by time, where mornings arrive slowly and nights are made of stars so vast they seem to whisper ancient secrets. My life isn't made of great deeds or riches others might envy. But every piece of it bears the mark of the choices I made, even the hardest ones, even those that drew tears. It's all mine. Every scar, every triumph, every shared dawn. Elijah now tends to small things, wood, vegetables, silences. His gaze still carries the road, but now it blends with the peace of someone who knows, at last, where to rest. Sometimes we walk together along the invisible trails around our home, saying nothing, needing nothing to fill the space between us but the certainty that, to find what truly matters, sometimes you have to lose yourself completely. I think, now and then, of the voices I left behind, the whispers, the judgments, the rules so tight they nearly broke me. And I'm grateful. Grateful because without them, I might never have felt the urgency to breathe with my own lungs. The road shaped me, the fall strengthened me, the love, this silent, immense love, taught me that freedom isn't something you find out there. It's something you build within, step by step, choice by choice, until one day you become whole, and I at last am whole. There are mornings when I wake before the sun, when the world is still just a whisper, and I lie there, listening to Elijah's steady breathing beside me. In those moments when the light hasn't yet painted the leaves outside golden, I feel the magnitude of the road we've traveled, not the one of dirt and dust, but the one that crosses the heart, made of renunciation, faith, and small daily courages. I think of the girl who once looked out a closed room's window and dreamed of something she couldn't even name. I think of the day she chose herself. And I realize that of all my achievements, this was the greatest, to have found, in the midst of the world and despite it, the right to be whole. Not perfect, not the ideal daughter, not the silent martyr, just me, Adeline Hartwell, made of scars, of choices, of love. Elijah stirs, murmurs my name like it's a secret, and I smile in the dark. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't need to know, because whatever it is, it will be lived with the serene certainty of someone who no longer belongs to any place that tries to shape her. I am the road, I am the home, and I am exactly where I'm meant to be.